My presentation is on ethical absolutism and whether or not there are universal moral values. So, ethical absolutism is the view that at least some moral values are universal and apply to all individuals. And not only that, but these universal moral values apply to every time period. So, for example, um, one moral value that I believe is universal is that human slavery is wrong. And so that means it applies to everybody, regardless of whether or not some people believe that it is acceptable, it's not. And that's a universal thing. And not only is it immoral today to condone human slavery, but it was also immoral hundreds of years ago when it was a common thing. And so basically, people that had slaves back then and that condoned slavery were in the wrong. One of the views that opposes ethical absolutism is ethical relativism, and that is the view that all moral values are relative to the individual or specific culture. And there's two specific types of ethical relativism. One is ethical subjectivism, and the other one is cultural relativism. And I'm going to talk a little bit about both of those. Ethical subjectivism is the view that the ultimate moral authority is the individual or the subject. In other words, each individual should have their own moral beliefs, and that these beliefs are, by definition, morally right. I disagree with the view of ethical subjectivism. So, the main problem with ethical subjectivism is that not every person should be able to determine what's morally right or wrong. Some people have opinions that are uninformed, illogical, or ignorant. And, these people may not necessarily have bad intentions, but maybe they simply don't have good reasoning skills, or they don't have sufficient knowledge of the issue, whatever it may be. And another reason that not every person should be able to determine what's morally right or wrong is that some people think that it's okay to violate the rights or the interests of others. For example, let's say I were to catch somebody stealing money from me and I were to tell them, hey, that's wrong. What if they were to tell me, I don't think it's wrong. I don't think there's any problem with stealing money from other people. If I'm a believer in ethical subjectivism, what am I then going to say after that? If this person feels that it's morally acceptable to steal money from others, then they're justified in their behavior, right? Well, what can I do? What can I say? And that just doesn't match with how we live our lives. We make judgments about people who behave in this way. We would feel that they're unjustified in their actions. And so, the view of ethical subjectivism just doesn't match with our lived experiences. So the other view within ethical relativism, which is cultural relativism, is the view that cultural norms determine what's ethically right and wrong. And this view would state that the values of one culture are neither superior nor inferior to those of another. So, for example, if one culture held the value that human sacrificing is morally right, and we were to compare that with the value of another culture, which is human sacrificing is morally wrong, the view of cultural relativism would state that neither one of these beliefs is better or worse than the other. So I do not agree with the view of cultural relativism, and the reason is because some cultures hold values that are inferior to other cultures. Not all cultures are in the same stage of critical thinking. There are some cultures that are still in the first stage of critical thinking, which is where they basically accept what's being told to them and what's been shown to them without questioning it or even putting much thought into things. They may have practices or customs that most of us would believe to be unethical, but they continue to do these things because that's all that they know. These are the things that they've been told, the things that they've been shown since the time that they were born, and they just continue to do these things out of tradition. And therefore, some cultures are just less morally enlightened than others, and these cultures just haven't accepted the universal moral values of the world. When we're faced with two conflicting theories, such as ethical absolutism and ethical relativism, how do we decide which theory is the best? Well, when considering determinism versus indeterminism, a philosopher named W.T. Stace believed that the best theory is the one that provides the most rational, complete, and persuasive understanding of our lived experience. So, regarding ethical absolutism and ethical relativism, which one would that be? The answer is ethical absolutism, because we live our lives based on the assumption that there are absolute moral standards. We frequently make moral judgments about the actions of other people, and typically we feel justified in doing so. For example, if I were to ask somebody their opinion of Hitler and the role that he played in the killing of millions of people, if I were to ask them if they believed that what he did was morally right, they would say no. But the ethical subjectivist view, which is that each individual determines what's morally right, morally wrong, that view would state that by definition, what Hitler did was morally right. And if I were to tell anybody that, I don't think that statement would bode well with them. The view of ethical absolutism just provides us with more subjective satisfaction and a more rational explanation of the world.